The being before me wasn't the meek and passive creature I'd recalled from my years monitoring the Earth from orbit. It walked and talked of wars and battles like it was a fact of life, not an affront to nature. It discussed death on the scale of entire worlds and sectors, as if it were a statistic and not a sign of species-wide sociopathy. It acted as if it were an apex predator in prime health, despite its readily visible age and frailty. Yet I could not see it as anything but an apex predator in its prime. For with each passing word, I could not look on that frail form with anything but a sense of genuine intimidation. What I saw before me, what walked and talked in front of me, wasn't the same weak and fragile race barely clinging onto life on the vast open deserts, not anymore. The being before me was a predator, by every definition of the word. Yet it acted almost counter to that notion the moment it noticed my discomfort. Indeed, he displayed signs of genuine care, concern, and compassion. Slowing down his pace, toning down his fervor and passion, even refusing to bare his teeth, like Key and Mitchell before him seemed so predisposed to do. Elijah cocked his head slightly, his eyes warming up once more. "You all right there?" "Why, yes. It's just, I've never encountered another race with that intense of a glare before, Elijah." "Well, what can I say? When an alien empire decides to trounce over everyone else like it's no big deal, it riles us up. Humanity will not stand for injustice, and so we put our money where our mouth is." The man chuckled at this, baring his fangs again, as I took even more steps back. "Fuck, right, no smiling. Right. Sorry." The humans were turning out to be an enigmatic dichotomy, seemingly capable of swapping between a predatory malevolence and an amicable benevolence at the drop of a hat. "You see, Lasara, our civilization was developed with a careful balance between ideological and cultural values, alongside cold and efficient practicality. You need the latter in order to sustain the former. That's just a fact of reality. These interlopers have lost track of reality, have deluded themselves into truly believing they were gods. And with their unmatched technological prowess, until we came around, well, they would have continued on that path unchallenged. Hell, they even got me good the last time we chatted." He chuckled, genuinely laughed at that fact. What had possibly been one of the more traumatic experiences of my life, laughed off like it was nothing. Oh, how perspective changes things. "But anyways, here, I want to show you this." He gestured towards an open computer terminal, revealing a series of holographic shapes projected into the air in front of us. It soon formed into what could only be called a Goliath of a creature, growing larger and larger as it encompassed the whole room, and then some. There are a few theories being thrown around as to the interloper's true nature. You see, we managed to capture one of them. Well, capture's a generous word here, but I digress. The creature's scale was made more apparent now, its form finally shrinking down and placed on a comparison chart. Between it and the average human, it completely dwarfed the human, and the room as well. After examination, it seems as if the interlopers, well, their biologies are even more bizarre than your own, Lasara. Their metabolic pathways and neural systems all point towards a mind that perceives the universe in a way unlike you or I. You see, we both have what our scientists are dubbing the Integrative Reactionary System, or the IRS. These meddlers, on the other hand, seem to have what's called a Compound Reactionary System, or CRS. Their neural pathways don't resemble anything like our own, and this means they perceive time much, much slower than us. I cocked my head, my frills once more fluttering, as I admitted my inability to grasp what was being spoken. "I don't follow." "Well, think of it this way. We're talking right now, and you feel no different than your interactions with your fellow Vanarans, correct?" "Correct," I answered bluntly, nodding. "Well, the meddlers, or at least the specific example we captured, would see us as a blur. Their ability to perceive, to think, is much slower than ours. If it were sitting over there, for instance, the 5 minutes we've been standing talking here would feel like a mere millisecond to it. Granted, we don't know the exact discrepancy ratio, but we strongly believe that it exists, and it is the reason why things are the way they are. We believe that they need these long breaks in between our contemporary civilizations, or else we'd outcompete them. But since they came first, they were the ones to set the ground rules. They reached out to your species when they were still fledgling. Eli. We're danger close to risking a fucking seizure. Get him back to hibernation now. A voice soon bellowed out over the halls, interrupting Elijah in his tracks. We're nearly out of time, Elijah muttered to himself under hushed breaths. What's going on? I thought I'd awoken. We forced you awake. What? Listen, there's no time to explain. I woke you up because of a promise, but also because of a contingency. We have to go, hurry. Elijah dragged me through the room, towards a series of holographic projectors of military make. This is the current state of the conflict. The holographic projectors displayed where we were relative to my galaxy, then it zoomed out revealing the entire local cluster. There was a clear demarcation across 1/4 of it, where my galaxy, amongst others, was enveloped by a sphere originating from the Milky Way, denoting its influence, or rather, its zone of control over this region of the cluster. Then there was the matter of the rest of the map, which showed the rest of the 3/4 of the galactic cluster, dominated by a different color, what I assumed were the interlopers. We control 1/4 of the local cluster, the interlopers control the rest, and perhaps even more clusters. The human seemed to shudder at that, but his eyes still burned fiercely. Do you remember the invasion the last time I talked to you? Yes. That wasn't an invasion. They didn't even realize we were there. They ignored us, and went right by us. The human ships and defenses that were hit were collateral. The perception latency theory, as it's being called, would make sense in this case, because the war that happened was between the two meddling powers, not between us or them. Unfortunately, we interpreted this collateral as a direct act of aggression against us, and so we retaliated. And now they most certainly know of our presence. My points from earlier still stands, however. My frills perked up. Their civilization, their government, their social institutions, their military, they don't hold a candle to the efficiency and drop potential of humanity's government and institutions. Elijah. I finally spoke up, my mind beginning to feel fuzzy as I struggled through the miasma. It's happening, isn't it? We have to. Elijah, stop. What is it? Let me speak. Okay. I understand, I comprehend all of this. But I need to warn you of a proverb from our ancient domes. The light that burns brightest likewise burns out the fastest. Please take stock and pace yourselves. You are a passionate species, one with a drive that I've seen from no other race in my 34 million years of existence. You, Elijah, have lived 100,000 Vandaran lives twice over, in the span of but a century. I explained as clearly as I could, forcing out the vice grip of hibernation, as it threatened to drag me back under. Elijah chuckled at this, and nodded affirmatively. Yep. That's what happens when the candle burns bright, Lasara. Do you want to make sure you do everything you set out to do, especially when there's so little time? The human had begun to notice my posture quickly deteriorating, as he held out his arm, and managed to catch me with a single grip. What? Hell. You Vandarans are lighter than I thought. They chalk it up to military cyber UGS, Lasara. Most civies my age probably can't hold a teacup, let alone a whole alien. Right, let's get you back. It was at this point that I began to blank out, my eyelids becoming heavier by the moment. At first, a slight drowsiness, the next, they began to feel like lead weights. I should have told you earlier, but yes, we forced you awake. You're technically still in the hibernative cycle, and prolonged wakefulness might result in permanent brain damage, so you've got to go back under. We haven't solved your species' hibernation issue sadly, but we're still trying. Elijah spoke with conviction, a genuine sense of disappointment blanketed it all, however, as the melancholic mood threatened to overtake them both. There's so much more I wish I could have said, wish I could have talked to you about. Then let's do it now. I retorted harshly, my eyes managing to remain open for the while, half-lidded, but still focused. Lasara. The light that burns brightest, I want to make sure you accomplish what you set out to do, Elijah. I know this will be the last time. I stared back with the same conviction as the human, attempting to smile, myself, trampling over centuries of social etiquette, and embracing the moment for all that it was worth. The human responded with a smile of his own, and nodded at me with the same youthful vigor that I knew him for. "Alright then. I'll start. You got a wife and kids?" "I used to. We separated. My clan was strict about our career path divergence. She went into the judiciary and the court system, and I am of a minor noble status and an academic. We could not continue." "What of you, Elijah? What of your family?" "Well, gee. I have a husband. He's the light of my world, my life, and so are my 2 kids, and my grandkids." "What are their names, Elijah?" "Renee. My kids are Ellie and Remy. They're both actually reaching the ripe old age of retirement now, and they have kids of their own, Georgie, Lee, and Alyssa. My kids detested my military career, though Lee and Alyssa were so infatuated with my decorated career that they decided to sign up and enter OCS. They're still serving now. My kids never really forgave me for that. My own children have denounced my familial name, Elijah. So I understand the pain of resentment. It's nothing that bad, Lasara. It's just, there's a gap between us, not enough for them to denounce my family name, or anything." "I see." I responded simply, nodding, as a wave of darkness threatened to hit me, but I fought through it, forcing out a smile as Elijah continued to support my weakened frame with his own every step of the way back to the hibernation chambers. We talked some more about our schooling, our homes, our favorite songs, and a bit about our respective careers. Elijah mentioned something about a game called baseball that he was absolutely infatuated with. Indeed, he announced his love for a great many things beside his military life: the arts, music, culinary escapades, that I could only gawk and drool at just by the sheer vividness of the descriptions alone. I wish I could have experienced this with him. I wish I could have seen them, felt them, tasted them, lived through all of them with my own 2 eyes, but it wasn't meant to be. Our time together was short-lived. Before we knew it, we were back where we started, staring down the pod which would be my home for the next millennia. Never before had I stared at my hibernation pod with a sense of utter dread and disappointment. Because I knew this would be it. I knew that this would be the last of my talks, my discussions, my interactions with this human. A human who knew me for an entire lifetime. As he laid me down, my eyes could barely make out his features. As he towered over me, for a moment I could see the young Elijah again, his enthusiastic vigor full of life, full of hope, full of a desire to live the few moments that had just transpired. A whole life leading up to barely a half day. The lights above and began to dim. Elijah would continue speaking, even as I could barely hear a single word he spoke, save for bits and pieces, as it had been over a century ago. "We'll watch over you while you sleep. You don't have to be afraid anymore, because we'll win this war. You don't have to fear whether or not you get to wake up, because we'll make sure you do. You don't have to fear losing anything, because we'll make sure the next time will be the last. Because humanity will be here, keeping watch. Because humanity will continue fighting until the cycle breaks. We'll be here, and we will win, no matter how long it takes." I felt his hand squeezing mine as I drifted off into a dreamless slumber. "Goodbye, Lasara."